Hello and welcome to this episode of Geography Girl. Today we're going to be looking at the City Beautiful movement, and I'm going to start with a quote. Happy is the city governed by the laws of art. At least that's according to Thomas Hastings. America in the 1890s was a depressing landscape of economic crisis, civil upheaval and a corrupt government. Whilst it was a nation of great power and wealth, it spasmodically lurched towards urban growth, with cities over 100,000 residents going from 88 to 50 between 1860 and 1910. The City Beautiful movement was a reform policy and urban planning movement, a response to rapid industrialisation, urbanisation, and the social problems of the time. In previous movements of urban planning, nothing more was considered than the arrangement of buildings, but the City Beautiful movement aimed to improve the aesthetic and functional qualities of a city, promoting urban beautification, civic pride, and social order, following a bloody civil war and revolution. The City Beautiful movement was born at the 1893 World's Columbian Exhibition in Chicago by a Daniel Burnham. This was set up to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival to the New World in 1492. Described as a hideous monster, a piteous, floundering monster too, Chicago became a temporary fairground to showcase the City Beautiful movement to millions of visitors. By 1909, there was a pretty comprehensive plan for the development of Chicago. This was led by the architect Daniel Burnham, who was the most famous proponent of the movement, playing a central role in the plans for Chicago, Washington, D.C., and San Francisco, and Frederick Law Olmstead, who was a fan of parks and green spaces, designing the Central Park in New York City and the Emerald Necklace in Boston. The plan for the development of Chicago included a massive 60-mile radius using a system of radial and concentric boulevards, all connected to outlying suburbs to its centre. The design was stately and well ordered, with the Chicago River being straightened to encourage more efficient transport, the city's many spread train station and tracks consolidated, and the city's outlying parks were increased, enhanced, and unified in an integral network. Here are some interesting facts about the Columbian World Exhibition Fair. First, the Great Ferris Wheel was said to have inspired the first amusement park in Coney Island. 46 countries had exhibitions at the fair, including Norway, who sent over a replica Viking ship. There were also 3 life-size replicas of the ships that Columbus floated over on, which were constructed in Spain and sailed over to America for exhibition. The Street in Cairo exhibition included a popular dancer known as Little Egypt. She introduced America to the suggestive version of a belly dance known as the Hoochie Coochie. It was the first formal gathering of members of both Eastern and Western spiritual communities, and the fair ended with Mayor Carter Harrison Sr. being assassinated by Patrick Eugene Prendergast, who was pretty pissed off after being passed over for a promotion. And there was also a refusal by fair planners to include an African-American exhibition, which was widely protested by the likes of Ida B. Wells, Frederick Douglass, and Irving Penn. So let's take a look at the main proponents of the City Beautiful movement. The first is beautification. Beautifying urban areas was the core aim of the City Beautiful movement. It was very much inspired by French urban design and the recent transformation of Paris, which was led by Georges Eugène Haussmann. Proponents of the City Beautiful movement sought to emulate the grandeur and elegance of European capitals and American cities, with grand boulevards, parks, gardens, and monumental architecture quickly becoming the hallmark of the movement. Architects made use of the white materials and stucco facades to create a striking finish, inspired by classical, neoclassical, and Renaissance designs. The Beaux Arts movement, which was an architectural style taught in the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, emphasised grandeur and symmetry and was frequently used to ornament public buildings and monuments. The hope was that these surroundings would rid urban areas of crime and unrest and enable their gentrification. The second is civic virtue. Advocates of the City Beautiful movement believed that the physical environment of a city could influence the behaviour and the character of its inhabitants. By creating beautiful, orderly spaces, they aimed to promote civic pride, social harmony, and moral uplift amongst the population. The movement made great use of architectural detailing normally reserved for cathedrals or upper classes of society. Though seemingly purely aesthetic, this had a greater moral purpose. Train stations, shops and warehouses were all designed to the same level of detail, regardless of whether they were being used by the wealthiest or the poorest members of society. Moreover, the extensive use of art and sculpture created a vivid backdrop to the lives of all those in the city. In doing this, planners hoped that they would facilitate the growth of a positive democratic culture. Everything was possible for every person, regardless of wealth or cultural background. This was more than mere urban planning. It was a beacon of American exceptionalism and the American dream. City Beautiful plans often included the creation of civic centres or monumental public spaces intended to symbolise civic pride and government authority. These spaces typically featured important government buildings, monuments and cultural institutions. The third is parks. The movement had a profound influence on urban parks and green spaces. Parks were conceived not only as places of recreation, but also as integral components of the city's overall design. 50 years ago, Burnham explained, before population had become dense in certain parts of the city, people could live without parks, but we of today cannot. Good citizenship, he argued, was the prime object of good city planning. Civic renewal, more generally, Burnham believed, could provide healthy activities to those citizens who could not afford extensive travelling and who thus depended on the city for recreation and cultural enrichment, cultural importance and nation building. What's been described as a frantic quest for Americanness, informed by the obsession with the New World, originality and horror of all things European, was in itself a kind of insecurity. Whilst artists like Louis Sutherland and Frank Lloyd Wright pursued cultural nationalism through newness, Burnham and his associates saw the United States as the rightful heir to traditions of Western culture and chose thus to recall, celebrate, and use those traditions themselves. This was somewhat achieved by enforcing the monumental with an emphasis on consistency, proportion, and detail, rather than scale or mass building. Examples of these included the White House in Washington, D.C. and Grand Central Station in New York. These are not the largest buildings in the surrounding area, but they dominate their landscapes due to their detail and consistency. A legacy in street design. Many of the wide, tree-lined boulevards and parkways that characterize American cities today were inspired by principles of this movement. These thoroughfares were designed to improve traffic flow, provide scenic vistas, and create a sense of grandeur in the urban landscape. And international influence. Whilst the City Beautiful movement was most prominent in the US, its ideas spread to other countries around the world, including cities like Buenos Aires, Melbourne, and Manila. The movement had a profound impact on Australia. Cities in Australia were seen to lack beauty and civic pride. There was a lack of architectural features, and the streets were characterised by street advertising, which was attributed to the materialism, apathy, short-sightedness, political interference, and indifference. The view was that Australia had wasted an opportunity to design cities comprehensively and aesthetically. Beautility was not just about beauty, but utility also, a proven economic value of improvements. Designs for Melbourne by William Campbell were again inspired with Paris and Washington in mind, with diagonal streets and new sites for special buildings. Legacy. The City Beautiful movement left a lasting legacy on urban planning and design in the United States and beyond. Many of its principles, such as the importance of parks and green spaces, the value of civic design, and the ideas of cities as works of art, continue to influence urban planners and the designers of today. Concepts such as walkable streets, mixed-use development, and the integration of green space to the urban fabric reflect the enduring legacy of this influential movement. And that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and I'll see you next time.